Honourable Member St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the Joint Select Committee's report on the Health Services Amendment Bill and the proposed health services regulations, and rise in support of the substantive bill as well. As has been said by previous speakers on the government side, this legislation has been very long in coming. That's the truth, sir. The Honourable Member for Christchurch, West Central, for example, will tell you every other month at one time I used to be calling him and asking him, when this coming in? When we bringing this to Parliament? It's taking too long. That is the truth. I remember, sir, when I was a young member of the Barbados Labour Party, newly joined, it was either 1994 conference or 1995 annual conference, shortly after we reclaimed office in this country. The annual conference, I remember, was at the Polytechnic, Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic, and Sir Harold St. John, now deceased, at that time already a former Prime Minister, this issue came up about clearing and keeping lots clear because they were a nuisance to people who lived near them. And Sir Harold, I think at that same conference, the then Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Owen Arthur, now deceased, announced that Sir Harold would get the highest national honour. And Sir Harold stood up at that conference and made this same proposal that government department should be allowed to clear people's lots of bush where they were a nuisance and add it on to the land tax. So this has been 30 years in coming, sir, 3 decades. That is the truth. I believe that we all know, because all of us have parish speech within the space of a year, and at virtually every parish speech, this issue is raised by a constituent, at least one constituent, about the nuisance created by their neighbouring or adjacent lot, which is causing health hazard to them, the vine spreading, insects and rats, etc., if there's a derelict building on the neighbouring lot, and calling on government to do something. The first St. James Parish speech, a lady with disabilities who I know well chastised me, that is the truth. She said that I won't send people to clear her neighbour's lot, which had a derelict building on it for years, nothing going on. And the truth of the matter, I had, during COVID, asked the 360 or 720 workers from NCC to go on the lot to clear it, and they did go on the lot, and within an hour of them being on the lot, some lawyer man turned up, say he's lawyer of the owner, and order them off the property. What you could do, you have to get off, as you know, Mr. Speaker. Technically, it's trespassing because there was no legislative or statutory right for any government department workers to go on there. Certainly no legislative or statutory right for any member of parliament to tell anybody to go and clear up any private property. So this legislation is extremely necessary because we all know, all of us in here, that our constituents expect that we have the authority, the power, unreasonably expect that to get lots clear up. And that if you don't get clear up, you don't have any government department you can call and clear it up. They expect you, in fact, to pull money out of your pocket to send somebody and pay for them to clear up their neighbor's lot, that causing a nuisance. But that's the reality of Barbados, sir. As the Honourable Member for St. Michael South just said, this is the daily living of Barbados, the daily reality. And these are the points, fine as they are, which make a difference in the lives of the people of Barbados, and which any caring or thinking member of Parliament, and of course by extension Cabinet and Parliament itself, will address, because it makes a difference in the lives of their constituents. Needless to say, in the aesthetic value and beautification of Barbados itself, which of course many of us have said many times needs cleaning up in many ways. We tried to do that, of course, during COVID with the increase in numbers of workers at NCC and the ash cleanup workers, etc. But there was no legislative or statutory authority for anybody to go on anyone's private property and clean it up. And we all know, sir, that there are, I think I had heard sometime, I obviously don't know the latest figures, but at one time about 15 or 17,000 derelict properties in urban Barbados alone. I believe that figure certainly was given in the first decade of this century. It may have increased by now. The Honourable Member for St. James South, in her intervention in this debate, spoke with tremendous clarity, and I commend her on some of the legal complications involved in this issue, where because of lack of wills and disputes relating to ownership of property when someone dies, and lack of proper title to property, even though under the last Barbados Labour Party administration, title to properties, title proceedings, Land Title Proceedings Act was simplified a bit from what it used to be before under the fictitious foreclosure suits process, that we still have a lot of title disputes relating to property in this country, as you well know, sir. And therefore, people sit down and the property goes to ruins, or the house that was on the property becomes derelict by a government that is mindful of the daily living of its people, can't just sit by and be idle. So, Sir Harold must be very happy in his grave today to see this Parliament, which he served so magnificently for so long a period, from 1966 to 2003, off and on, now debating to bring this into legislation. The penalties, administrative penalty, sir, I know one of the mandates that the Joint Selection Committee gave itself was to see whether they were disproportionate and or unreasonable. The committee came up with the view that they were not, and that they were adequate. $300, sir. That is minor. That is 3 Sir Grant lease. You spend that, you spend more than that in a dinner for 2 on a night. The $10 per day extra penalty. Again, that doesn't hurt you too much, sir. And that's in line, for example, with the penalty which is payable on failure to file, for example, an annual return at the corporate registry, or when you file it after the date. As you know, Mr. Speaker, you pay $10 per day penalty. Of course, you have the relief board there, same relief board as established under the Land Tax Act, by which any individual who thinks that this penalty, this sum, is excessive or is difficult for them because, for example, they are elderly or on a small pension, or person with disabilities, for instance, there's provision for the relief board and appeals from the relief board to the High Court judge if necessary, which is a good thing and which certainly I support, sir. But I think the whole point is that the thrust of the legislation is that we don't want to have that anyone is going to be imposed with having to pay a fine. We want you to clean up your property, because it has to do with national pride. It has to do with cleanliness. It has to do with just making Barbados the best place that we can be. And environment and the state of our environment and of its component parts right down the communities and the private properties is essential to that. When I was an opposition member of parliament, I only remember two issues that on the floor of parliament, the then Prime Minister, the then Member of Parliament for St. Michael South, and I agreed on. One was that government really and truly was negligent in paying people compensation when they compulsorily acquired a property. Governments with a small G, sir, both Barbados Labour Party and Democratic Labour Party past governments, we agreed on that. And on this particular point, that people need to be penalized for helping to make Barbados unclean and in a sad state of repair. Because he spoke about a time, I think, when he was being obviously chauffeur-driven in the Prime Minister's car, and somebody threw something out of a minibus, and he told his driver blow on the minibus and pass it out, and tell the minibus man to tell whoever drop it out to go and pick it up. And I said quite honestly, I can't do that. I don't have any chauffeur or anything, so. But when I see that happening, I get so vexed, because these are the same people who can say how they're patriotic and nationalistic and on Independence Day wearing Barbados colors, but throwing things out of a car window, out of a minibus, without regard to the damage that it can cause and to the untidy state that it leaves Barbados. So I'm happy to intervene in this debate. The Select Committee made the change in terms of minister, and as you will know, Mr. Speaker, a lot of our previous legislation from the 60s and 70s and 80s sought to define a minister as being, for example, Minister of Health, but obviously a Prime Minister has the total prerogative to assign different government departments to different ministries as time goes by, and therefore it has come along that to precisely define minister under a particular category of ministry has become shrewd over time in a lot of cases, and now the drafting practice within recent times has been to leave minister blank, and it then falls to the Interpretation Act to say who the minister is, and obviously minister in an act then becomes the minister who has responsibility for that particular statute. And hence the committee has recognized that and has removed the precise definition of minister, I think Minister of Health, from this legislation. One of the complexities, of course, is that many of the vacant lots in Barbados are owned by people who live overseas. We know that, either Barbadian born or non-Bajans. That's the truth, they don't live here. Some of them buy or acquire the lots, well, either buy or they acquire by way of succession, and don't look back on them. And that is not good, because in the countries where they live, North America, in a lot of countries, they can't leave the properties, so that is the truth. So why do it in the country of your birth? Thankfully, where I live, I had people who cooperated. In front of me was a lot until recently owned by a Barbadian living overseas, and always in great need of debushing. And I had to go to the land tax or call the land tax to find out who the land tax bill is sent to, and write the person out in England and tell them, you know, this ain't good enough. And they cooperated. Like the truth, they told me, yeah, okay, well, Mr. Hinkson, whenever you think the property needs clearing, give me the name of a landscape person, a gardener. I gave them, and I would call that person. The person would send them photographs of the state of the property and give them permission or instruct them to clear it and pay them. But not everyone is so cooperative. In a lot of cases, you can't even find out, to be truthful, who the owner is. Because, you know, somebody might be getting a land tax bill or the land tax, say the land tax bill remains unpaid, right? And of course, we know that ultimately, BRA has the authority legislatively to sell the property for mounting arrears of land tax. But as I said, the government doesn't want to have to sell out anybody's property for failure to pay, whether it's land tax or failure to pay any administrative penalty. We just are calling on people to keep their properties in a state, in a normal state, that it is not a nuisance to anyone. You know, in a lot of cases, so regrettably, too many people really don't care about anybody else, you know. Just think about the self. I don't even think, in a lot of cases, they really have deep care or respect for the families, the wider family. But it doesn't impact on their mental composition or their psyche, how their acts or omissions affect others. And this is a prime example. And this is why Parliament now has to intervene, and has intervened after a very long time in passing legislation to address this problem. I note, sir, that the Act also binds the regulations. In fact, it says binds the state, which means that the penalties, of course, apply to the state as well, and this is good. It is therefore incumbent now on government and its institutions, its departments, statutory corporations which own or manage land, to have it clear as well. Because, of course, government has to set an example in this scenario as well. The 21 days notice to remedy the breach I'm satisfied that the arguments given by the health officers and the environmental officers in the report are satisfactory in terms of the period that the Aedes aegypti, for example, can take to breed. 21 days, I'm satisfied, is long enough, even though a case was made for it to be, slightly longer, 28 days notice. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I am very happy to support this bill and the report, which is, together with the bill, as it seeks to address what is really and truly a tremendous national challenge, a crisis, I would almost say, one that affects each and every of the 30 constituencies which we have in this Parliament. I'm obliged to you, sir.